Hello and welcome to Rando Rob. Each week on Rando Rob, I'll be showing and discussing one item from my large collection of collections. New shows appear every Monday, and throughout the week, I'll be adding older episodes of Rando Rob that were previously only available to my Patreon subscribers. You can watch episodes of Rando Rob on YouTube at youtube.com/Rob O'Hara. Just look for the Rando Rob playlist. Audio versions of the show are available on my website at podcast.robohara.com or through iTunes. Just search for Rando Rob. Thanks for watching or listening, and I hope you enjoy this vintage episode of Rando Rob. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Rando Rob. This is the first Rando Rob of 2022. It's hard. You know, every time I type it, I type 20202. I type 2022, which is incorrect. We won't be having a 5-digit year for about 8,000 years, I believe. Just a little under 8,000 years. What mug do we have this morning? This is a mug from Antique Archaeology, and it has the city and state there, which is LeClaire, Iowa, and then there's another one in Nashville, Tennessee. If you watch American Pickers, this is the real store, the Antique Archaeologists. Mike. This is not Mike. The other guy. Anyway, I haven't finished my coffee, obviously. But a few years ago, my wife and I and daughter met my aunt from Chicago just outside while we stayed in LeClaire, Indiana, because a few miles away, Paul McCartney was playing. And my aunt in Chicago is a huge Paul McCartney fan. By the way, this is all off the top of my head. This was not what I planned on talking about this morning. My wife is a huge, they're all Beatles fans. And I grew up and I loved the Beatles. My dad, pretty much required listening around our house was Abbey Road. You know, the big stuff, the Abbey Road, the Sgt. Pepper, the White Album. We listen to those on road trips now. Like when we take road trips with our kids or just my wife and I, we will put those albums on and listen to them. And so we all grew up listening to the Beatles. We all enjoy the Beatles, and had a great time at the concert seeing Paul McCartney, and we had a great time going to Antique Archaeology and looking around and seeing they have all kinds of stuff that they've bought from the show or on the show that you can see that they've fixed up. There's an episode, well, I was going to say there's an episode where he buys a motorcycle, but I think there's 1,000 episodes where he buys a motorcycle. But there's some motorcycles in the shop, there's some neon signs, and everything's for sale. Years ago, we went to I forgot what it's called. It's like Number One Pawn, Gold and Silver Pawn or something, but it is the show that is the basis for Pawn Stars, the quote unquote reality show. And we went there like really before it had, I won't say before it had got popular, but before it really blew up. We were in Vegas. We decided to go. And you have to line up on the sidewalk, and they let people in, and then basically you are paraded around the store, single file line. You have to stay behind these velvet ropes. And the one thing everybody kept whispering and asking was, where's the people from the show? And you know, now you can look this stuff up on Google. I'm sure that's probably where I found the information. But we found out that nobody from the show is ever there. They don't even really work there. Sometimes they come in. We went a second time when we went to Vegas to go see Guns N' Roses during their residency at the Hard Rock Cafe. We went, and there was a Maserati out back, and someone said that was Chumley's car. But he may or may not have been there, and he certainly wasn't inside the part of the store that you could see as a customer. So it's very And also the part of the pawn shop that operates as a pawn shop is not where you think it is by watching the show. Like the counter that you see on the show where people come up, that's not like an actual functional counter. When we were there, it's just to look at memorabilia, more or less. The part that's like a day-to-day, the store's kind of L-shaped, and the small part of the L towards the bottom over in that area is where the pawn shop part operates, and you never see that on television. So it turns out reality television, not that real. But the antique archaeology place was fun to go to. And they said that the guys, this of course when back they were all getting along. Guess they're not getting along anymore. But they said that he would come in once or twice a week. It just so happened that he did not come in on a day that we were there. But and there wasn't a lot like that I would buy. You know, all these places, boy, am I going down a rabbit hole. When we went to Pawn Stars, we thought, well, if there's a small item, I might buy it. Well, there's no small items. What there are were Pawn Stars t-shirts, Pawn Stars water bottles, Pawn Stars bobbleheads, Pawn Star posters, Pawn Star, you know, that's what they're selling. So when you go there as a tourist, you're not buying something that somebody pawned in. I suppose you could, but that's what they're trying to sell you. And the antique archaeology was a little bit like that. They had t-shirts, they had you know, stuff tied to the show, but there were things that you could totally get, but a different clientele, because now we're talking restored antiques, so several $100s versus although most of the things on Pawn Stars are also $700 or several $100. I should really finish my coffee before I do these. So anyway, this is the first Rando Rob of the year. I literally now I'm still slowly, the shelves behind me are put together as I try to make myself look like I don't have bedhead. The shelves behind me are now assembled. I still need the topper pieces. I still need to go back to IKEA and get the one more shelves to go on top. But I'm slowly bringing things in and putting them on the shelves. It's going great. I'm having a good time doing it. Over the past week, while I was off work, I rearranged things a little bit in here. I used to have about a ton of these IKEA white tables, and I used to have it in this kind of a big L-shaped thing, but I had to move stuff because of where the shelves are. And so I took two of the tables and I built an island over here in the middle of the room. So there's a lot of space, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 feet all the way around all the sides of the island. So so it's not, you know, in the way. So now I can walk straight here to get to the shelves. I can walk over to these bookshelves. I can go around the table that way, and I can be on that. That's the definition of all 4 sides, I suppose. But I moved my work computer over here behind me, which I just booted up, and I'll be using very shortly. Oh, that's weird that there's like a little part of the work computer that I can't tell if it's a reflection or if it's something actually coming through the green screen. Well, it's not really a green screen. That's weird. Anyway, so hope that doesn't really block too much of the view. And you know what, I also had, if you remember on the show, I used to have these LED light bulbs that changed colors. I have a lamp here with 3 outlets, or bulb, whatever you call it. Yeah, I guess outlets. And another lamp over there with another 3. And with my phone, I could change the mood, I guess, kind of the view, by making the room different colors and stuff. I've owned the light bulbs for right at 1.5 years, and just a little under 1.5 years. And at about 15 months, one of the bulbs went bad, and between 15 and 18 months, now 5 of the 6 have gone bad. And they're not super expensive, but they're expensive. I mean, they're $10 a bulb or something. So I'm expecting them to last more than 1.5 years. It's really wouldn't be convenient for me to do that LED lighting all around the entire room. I really like that lamp idea. So, I mean, I'm going to have to upgrade, but it's going to be like $100 or something to get 6 bulbs that are better quality. So Maybe I'll do that soon. By the way, I don't have it within arm's reach, but if you don't read the Patreon messages, but you do watch this for some reason, with last month's Patreon funds, I bought a new microphone, I bought a audio interface, and I bought a mixer. 2 of the 3 of those are here, but the mixer is not, and I need all 3 to change things. But I've been talking to Sean, my co-host on Throwback Reviews, and Sean is just a audio wizard when it comes to types of equipment and things, and he's got a sound on his podcast that I'm so jealous of. His sound just sounds so good, and I've been working with him because this room just gives me a lot of echo. It gives me weird stuff. I've done everything I can, really. And he said, it's probably the type of microphone and stuff. So that's like all the Patreon funds for last month and bleeding over into another month pretty much went to audio upgrades. So you won't hear it on this yet, and you won't hear it on this week's podcast, this week's episode of Sprite Castle, but you will hear it in the near future. Hopefully you'll hear a little bit of a different sound. So I'm looking forward to that. Looking forward to, I always enjoy taking the money from Patreon and putting it, I was going to say dumping it, but dumping it has a negative connotation, but reinvesting it into the podcast and the, different parts that keep the engine running. So I'm looking forward to getting all that stuff set up. Boy, have I rambled. I can ramble. So anyway, for this week's episode of Rando Rob, I did not randomly walk over to those 4 shelves back there. I randomly walked over to these 3 shelves. Now you can't see them. They're not in shot. But some of the shelves over here are more functional. There's a small area of DVDs. There's a couple different areas of books. There's a few overflow for the lunchbox collection. So there's just some random things on these shelves. The shelves over here look exactly like those shelves, except for they're 1 shelf taller. But there's also several shelves over there of computer software. There's boxed Commodore 64 games. There's some old boxed vintage DOS games. One of them, when I walked over there, caught my eye. That kind of reminded me of a fun story, and so that's what I grabbed. And so let me pull that up here. And this is a big, heavy box release called Trivia Fever. Now, the funny thing about this, let's get into it. This version is for the Commodore 64, as you can see there. This is one of 2 boxed copies of this game that I own, and this is not the first copy. The first copy I owned was for the Apple II, which came from my parents' store. We've talked about the store, Yukon Software, and this was a game that they carried. So they had, when the store closed, most of the things went into basically a fire sale, just trying to recoup their losses. But whatever didn't sell after that either got sold at garage sales or, just kind of tossed or whatever. And so that's where my original copy of Trivia Fever came from. It didn't sell in the store. It didn't sell when the store closed. It didn't sell after that. And eventually it was sitting in the garage, and I just kind of acquired it. So on the back, you can see a little bit about this game. This is a trivia game. Of course, trivia games in the 1980s were all the rage because Trivial Pursuit, which is why I added the picture there. So you can see there's a picture of, just people having a good time. And then there's some of the things that are in the box. You can see there's the spinner, and there's the disc, and there's all that stuff, right? And then down at the bottom, it shows some examples of the game. Now, if you're not really paying attention, first of all, this box is heavy. This box has some weight to it. There's obviously things in here more than just a floppy disk. And so I will open this because this is like a vintage copy. So first of all, Obviously, if it's a computer game, it's going to have a floppy disk, Trivia Fever, right? But there's a couple of interesting things. And this copy, literally, I don't think was ever played. Here's a customer safety note. It says, for safety's sake, as with any other materials, please do not throw or flip the Trivia Fever category selector from player to player. Apparently, that was so important that they needed to include this separate printed piece of paper. And there's a customer note here, and it says, note, please note that Trivia Fever should take less than 2 minutes to load once the message "please wait while loading" is displayed. But if it takes more than 3 minutes, it says please restart and load it again. And it says, it talks about floppy disk drive compatibility, which is something that you ran into if you had a non-name brand or an off-brand or third-party floppy drive. Sometimes it was not compatible with games that had copy protection. Now, this is where things start to get a little interesting. There is a physical spinner here, and you could see you would spin this thing and go wild. Now, why would you need a spinner for a computer game? Well, that's email's going off. That's interesting to get into. There's also, here is an entire booklet of trivia tally sheets to keep track of scores and things like that. Why? Because the game does not save that information. So, when you fire up this game and you play, you tell it how many people you want or whatever, and it will show you the board. And then it says spin the actual spinner. And so you spin the spinner, and that tells you what category to move to. Now, that kind of seems to go against what a computer game is that we would think of as a computer game. You would think that that would be built into the software, right? A random spinner, but no, they included a physical spinner. So when you move to a piece, to a board thing, and like, let's say you move to entertainment, it says, now ask a question from the giant Q&A trivia book that is included. And there are colored tabs, if you can see that, so that you can flip to the right category, and it will say, go to this page. And the pages look just like essentially Trivial Pursuit cards with questions and answers. And so there's also down in here, there's more things. There's a manual. This is but notice that it says guidelines for play with or without a computer. Now, this is very interesting to me. Also, down here, before we get too far, you can see that you have bookmarks. Now, you know what? Something's really weird with the camera screen. I've never seen this. Something has changed on OBS because this is bright green. And on the video, it's black and it's see-through. Oh, because it's a green screen. And I did do that. Let's see what this yellow one looks like. Yeah, well, you could kind of see through that. This is the weirdest thing. I've never had this happen before. This is red. But anyway, yeah. So this Q&A book, right? This is your trivia game. Now let's get back to what this says on here. Trivia Fever's book of questions and answers. And it says thousands of challenging questions, blah, 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 blah. But I want to mention this again. Guidelines for play with or without a computer. So apparently, the people who made this game, the company who made this game, weren't convinced that it would that they would recoup their losses or make a profit by making a computer trivia game, or they were trying to do one of two things, or it's possible, I don't really know, but it's possible that they had a trivia game already and then they decided to incorporate it into the computer. So the actual game on the disc doesn't really do that much. It kind of graphically represents where you are on a board. and moving around, but that's kind of it. Your movement is determined by the spinner. Not only your movement, but the categories are determined by your spinner, and the questions and answers come from this book. So it's a very strange idea. Again, my family, everybody in my family loved playing games, and we loved, especially we all loved trivia. We would watch Jeopardy. I watch Jeopardy with my wife and my daughter now. Like, we DVR, we just save the last 10 episodes. So anytime somebody goes out there, we can go through, several episodes of Jeopardy and binge watch that. So we're a trivia family. We love game shows, and we love, really, nowadays we don't play board games, but we used to. And so anyway, this is Trivia Fever. So here's what's interesting about this. When I got my original copy of Trivia Fever, it's for the Apple II computer, and I didn't have an Apple II computer. I had a Commodore 64. And so I could play, like when my friends came over, we could play trivia and do things like that, but we couldn't use the actual disc. And then years later, probably in the mid to late 90s, I was in a thrift store and I found this copy, which is the exact same thing, but for the Commodore 64. And so now I have two copies that sit side by side on the shelf. One is for the Apple II, and one is for the Commodore 64. So now I have two copies. I can play two rounds of Trivia Fever. So if anybody comes over and is ready for trivia, I suspect the questions will be a little bit dated, but we'll make it through. So anyway, thanks everybody for sticking around for another year. Some of you paid a year at a time, so you're sticking around for a year. It's going to be a fun year. It's going to be a fun 2022, and I am glad. If you can hear that off in the distance, my wife is making breakfast now, so that's my cue to get out of here. So anyway, thank you guys for sticking around last year and for coming back, and I hope to continue to provide content that everybody enjoys listening to and occasionally watching. So thanks, everybody. I will see you all very soon.